Welcome to another episode brought to you by Imagine Strength, the future of safe, simple, and effective high-intensity training equipment. Are you a HIIT studio owner looking for equipment that's not just top-notch, but also tailored to your specific needs? Imagine Strength is your answer. Inspired by the legendary Arthur Jones, Imagine Strength is revolutionizing the HIIT industry with their state-of-the-art yet affordable equipment. Their team doesn't just sell HIIT equipment, they live and breathe it. I've personally experienced their gear at the Resistance Exercise Conference, and let me tell you, it was an intense workout that I won't soon forget, in the best way possible, of course. So why choose Imagine Strength? Number one, they provide customized solutions for HIIT studios. Number two, they have budget-friendly yet high-performance designs. And number three, they're committed to innovation and excellence in high-intensity training specifically. Founder Jeff Turner and his dedicated team are on a mission to make HIIT accessible to everyone. Getting started is easy. Number one, visit imaginestrength.com. Number two, consult with their expert team. And number three, choose the equipment that will skyrocket your business. Don't wait. Head over to imaginestrength.com and elevate your HIIT studio today with Imagine Strength. Lawrence Neal here, and welcome back to High Intensity Business, your one-stop shop for elevating your HIIT business and fueling your passion for high-intensity training. This is episode 433, and a little bit off the beaten path because we do love to talk about nutrition and health and fitness in general. Today's guest is very popular, Dr. Ted Naiman. Dr. Ted Naiman is a board-certified family medicine physician in Department of Primary Care at a leading major medical center in Seattle. His research and medical practice are focused on the practical implementation of diet and exercise for health optimization. He has an undergraduate degree in mechanical engineering and utilizes engineering principles when dealing with complex systems such as human health and nutrition. And that is why his work resonates with me so much, because I love the way he thinks. Ted, great to see you. Welcome back to the podcast. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great. Thank you. Great to see you too. Nice to talk to you. I appreciate you having me back on. This is awesome.
The pleasure is all mine. So give us a quick update on you. So it's been quite a while since we spoke, at least a year, I think. And I Googled you. I couldn't see a lot of stuff recently, maybe a little bit of content you've done for various people, various entities. But what have you been working on for the last 6 to 12 months? What's your focus been?
Oh, wow. Well, okay. I still, work full time as just a lowly primary care doctor down in the trenches with, real people with real diseases. But in all my spare time, I've been writing a book entitled Satiety per Calorie that's supposed to be this giant overview of, how successful diets work in general. And then I'm working with the guys at Diet Doctor, Dr. Andreas Einfeld. Diet Doctor spun off this new company called HAVA, H-A-V-A, and we're building an app and a system and a product that's basically looking at satiety per calorie and helping people evaluate their dietary quality for satiety per calorie and then possibly tweak that upwards a little bit. So the goal is to, eat to satiety and automatically eat a little bit less calories. And that's what I've been working on mostly.
Sounds super interesting. Excited to see those things come to fruition. You got me thinking there. I was reading that new Blue Zone documentary on Netflix. Have you seen that? Seen that come up recently?
I have not. I'm familiar with it.
Okay. Have you got any thoughts? Obviously, you haven't seen it, but obviously you've got some thoughts on that whole body of work around the Blue Zones. I'm curious.
Well,
yeah, go ahead.
I was raised Adventist. I was an Adventist and a vegetarian for decades. I trained at Loma Linda University in Southern California. That's where I went to medical school. So I lived in a blue zone. I know everything that the Adventists are doing in that particular blue zone. And so, they're the blue zone thing, to a certain extent, the people in the blue zones have longevity in spite of their diets, maybe not because of their diets. So it's probably a mistake to directly attribute anything longevity to anything they're doing, in particular with their diets. It would be like, well, it's so associational, and there's so many other factors. These people just have this, like Adventists in particular, have this religious health. Basically, the whole point of Adventism is that your body is a temple of God, and you're not going to do anything to it to defile it. And so your whole body is just this religious item that you're not going to screw up. You know what I mean? And when you have this mindset, it doesn't really matter what your particular dietary pattern is. You're just going to be healthier than everybody else. And so there's a lot of stuff going on in these blue zones that is happening in spite of diet pattern, not because of diet pattern. You know, if you look at the Adventist health studies, you take the vegetarian Adventists and the pescatarian Adventists, and they have better outcomes if they're eating fish. So it can't just be elimination of meat, right? So it would be a mistake to say, well, eat less meat, you're going to live longer. You know what I'm saying? So there's a lot of associational stuff that really confounds the diet picture. But I think a lot of the other social factors in these blue zones is a big deal. And so you really just can't pull out one particular diet thing. A lot of people pull out whatever their favorite diet pattern is and try to attribute longevity to that. And I don't think you can really pull that off, if you know what I mean.
Hmm. Yeah. And is it, if I'm remembering this correctly, because I haven't finished watching the entire show, but I did look into the blue zone thing when it first came out. Is it that there's a few factors, right? So there's the social community aspect, the fact that all these tight knit communities, and they stay, you know, friends with these small groups throughout their entire lives and support each other. There's I think is it Sardinia? There's like they're all very physically active. So they're all doing lots of activity. In some cases in Sardinia, I think there's like an incline, like they're constantly going up hills and that kind of thing. And then there's also this great sense of purpose they all have with their careers or their craft, right? And then with regard to diet, way I understood it is it might be wildly different across all of them, but in terms of their quantity and their ability to stop at 80% full seems to be kind of universal. Is there anything else? Is that accurate? Is that actually the main reason why they're perhaps living, to these, they have the higher percentage of centenarians?
No, I think you nailed it. I mean, they're living in these mountainous regions with just very high step counts, very high activity levels, lots of social connection, a lot of purpose, a lot of just built-in happiness with quality of life. And then on the diet side, they're mostly just eating real food, some sort of local, seasonal, real food, and not basically Twinkies or whatever. And so you're right. It is this nice little combination of factors that doesn't necessarily have to fit any one particular dietary pattern. It's just sort of a bigger picture. But I think you did totally nail it. And then maybe, of course, throw in the fact that nobody's got birth certificates, and there might be something going on there. But yeah, I do think
What do you
that
mean
you
by that?
encapsulated it.
I don't know. What
Say
do you
again?
mean about the birth certificate thing? What is that? Sorry, that's gone completely over my head. What is that? What do you mean by that?
Oh, there's just some
Faking it,
controversy about
the ages.
properly aging persons in blue zones is less accurate than it is entirely possible that a blue zone is just a place where birth certificate documentation is inaccurate and nobody really knows how old anyone is.
I never even thought of that. That's amazing. Yeah, I found it is to be quite liberating, because it's kind of, if you remember when we last spoke, we kind of talked about how, we talked about your journey in diet and how you've really, how much it's evolved and changed over time, but how you've been part of all the different kind of diet camps and kind of arrived at a point where you're like, it all works so long as you're kind of not eating too much, hopefully getting enough protein in, etc., getting enough kind of nutrient density, enough satiety per calorie, as you would say now. And we also talked about how, so long as you're, lean and you have good body composition and you're relatively healthy, you can get away with eating 10-20% of, empty, low nutrition calories, call it maybe junk food, and still thrive, right? And this, I felt that, maybe I'm biased and I was kind of looking for support for this, but when I was watching a documentary, I kind of felt, well, the fact that they're eating such a varied diet and it doesn't seem to really play a key role is another kind of data point for there is no magical diet, sorry, have you got a thought on that? Or
No, I totally agree. And that's kind of what I've evolved to as well. It's like there are certain factors that are at play, but there's no one particular pattern that anybody has to eat. There's no one, which really fits all of our scientific data where, low fat works, low carb works, high protein works, paleo works, Mediterranean works, higher fiber works, lower energy density works. These all work, and it's kind of liberating because you don't have to religiously or dogmatically follow any of these things, and you can kind of zoom out and look at the big picture. And then you can also look at, even beyond diet into exercise factors and lifestyle factors and other things. And you have so many levers available to you. You can kind of pick and choose which ones you want to focus on, or maybe a little bit of all of them. But yeah, go ahead. I totally like what you're saying.
Thank you. So even though I just said that, I still sometimes get distracted by some amazing case study. And it's one I wanted to just touch on with you briefly. I don't know if you've seen this. Her name was Maggie, lovely woman, really interesting, 82-year-old rancher in Canada. She was recently on Anthony Chaffee's podcast, Anthony Chaffee MD.
Mm-hmm.
The woman can speak for England or speak for Canada. I don't know if you have that expression or they have that expression. But it was she's very endearing. She's one of those people who can speak for ages, but you're hanging on to every word. Like, it's fascinating. Incredibly lucid, seems to be in wonderful cognitive and physical health, looks fantastic at 82 years old. Been a rancher for over 65 years, just eats meat. Well, no, that's not accurate. Meat, butter, carnivore, but with a nice helping of fat, sort of not just animal fat, but butter and that kind of thing, but no vegetables, that sort of thing, right? So really seems to be thriving on that. It's amazing. And I'm seeing a bit of dogmatic reaction in a lot of the comments, like this is why carnivore diet is the best and everything else sucks, this is superior. And I thought, yeah, okay, look, it's an interesting anecdote. It's just one person. I mean, the way I understand it is a lot of the other diet camps also have their people. They have their vegetarian or their vegan who's 90 and looks incredible and seems to be thriving as well. But obviously a lot of people in the individual camps don't go outside to see that. And so I was like, is this really just this way of saying, this woman probably has a great look. She probably optimized her lifestyle through like being super active, massive amount of purpose in her life, massive family. So she seems to have a great social life going. Obviously, she's eating a diet that is probably well controlled in terms of calories and void of a lot of junk food. It sounds like she doesn't eat any junk food whatsoever. And therefore she's done well, but it's not evidence to say that she wouldn't have done just as well had she eaten a different kind of diet that was also controlling for the same thing, same calorie intake, etc. Have you heard of her? Did you see that? Have you heard of her? Do you know what I'm talking about? And what's your thoughts?
Yes, I do. I didn't watch the interview, but I saw it on social media, so I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah. And I love anecdotes like this because it basically lets people know that, hey, properly raised animal products can be a very healthy part of a human diet. There's no particular reason why that is just automatically bad for you. So I really like things like that. It definitely counterweights all the plant-based dogma that's out there. I do think, though, that that doesn't mean that everyone has to just eat meat to be healthy. I mean, you've got, my mother, for example, she's 92 now, so she's slowing down a little bit. As of, a year ago at 91, she was living independently, driving, exercising every day, just very sharp and doing all these things and never eats red meat. Like, she's just been a lifelong vegetarian. She just hasn't eaten it pretty much ever. So I do think there's a lot of freedom to the plant versus animal thing is very, very a lateral move. And that's, I think that some people get mired down in plants versus animals, which is really just a smokescreen. It's not that important, if you know what I mean. I think a carb versus fat is a lateral move, both chains of carbon energy. I think plant versus animal is a fairly lateral move because they both can have very good or very bad combinations of macronutrients and micronutrients. And so those are kind of distractions to a much bigger picture. But I do like these anecdotes because it just proves to people that, hey, this is possible. This is not necessarily a bad thing. So I do love the carnivore anecdotes, and so that's actually a great thing to see.
Yeah, I actually, a friend of mine said exactly the same thing as you there. Dr. Bryce Lee, who's been on my podcast before, great friend, great, just brilliant guy. He said it was interesting because I was kind of coming at it from the perspective of, all these people are putting this person on a pedestal, like they're living the perfect life, eating a perfect diet, and everyone should follow that. And he was like, well, there's some way of looking at this. It's like this is just a great data point that if you love eating meat, eggs, and butter, that actually it's just another data point to say that she's thrived eating that kind of diet, and it's not to say that that is the one and only diet, but it's to say that you're not going to clog your arteries necessarily, and actually that diet you can thrive on. So I thought that was an interesting way to look at it, just like you're saying. So it made me feel a lot better, although I'm not quite as disciplined as I was, Ted. I need to dial that in. That's one of the things we'll be talking about today as well. So but I will link it up in the show notes because I do think it's a wonderful podcast that Anthony did, and kudos to him for just letting Maggie talk and talk and talk. It's not easy as a podcaster to do that, or a lot of podcasters struggle. I certainly do, as you can tell. I like to talk too much, and and I think I'll link it up because it's so inspiring for people that want to see what's possible if you just do enough physical activity and you look after yourself and you eat well, because there's no reason why. I mean, you listen to this woman, she's bought a new farm. She's super driven in her business. It's such a, what some people would consider a late juncture in life, and it makes you realize how long life can be if, well, it could be if you control as much as you can. I understand there's things obviously outside of our control as well. So, Ted, next question. So it's one more general question I wanted to ask you, really. What have you changed your mind about, if anything, in recent memory or since we last spoke, that comes to mind for you in terms of health, fitness, and nutrition? What can you think of that you kind of changed your mind about lately in one of those areas, if anything?
Right. Well, probably protein percent, right? So, I wrote this book, The PE Diet, just looking at protein percent, and it's the single most powerful metric when it comes to ad lib caloric intake for like humans, animals, or anything else. And so, protein is this giant big deal. But what I realized is that if you look at different populations and different outcomes, you don't have to eat a high protein percent diet to be successful. It's just like plants versus animals. There are plenty of groups out there, the Okinawan and the Samane, and all these groups are eating, 12% protein, 15% protein, great outcomes because they're pulling other levers that are also powerful, like lower energy density foods and higher ratio of fiber to non-fiber carbohydrate. And they're basically doing other things that improve satiety per calorie and nutritional density versus caloric density. And so protein is just one of these levers. It happens to be the biggest one, it happens to be my favorite one. I'm super biased and I wrote a whole book about it. But now I'm like, I'm like, oh, hey, by the way, that's not it at all. It's almost like you could be super healthy if you just focus really hard on exercise and kind of ignore your diet. There are plenty of people out there who basically exercise so much that diet quality goes, the importance of diet quality goes way down as your caloric burn goes up. So if you're burning thousands of calories, you can eat a lot more junk and still suck the protein and nutrients out of that junk and then just burn off the calories. This is not the best way to do it necessarily, but it's possible. So all of these levers are possible. The high protein thing works, but then looking at other dietary factors works as well, or just kind of ignoring diet and focusing on exercise works. And so I've basically come to this place where there are so many different levers you can pull and you look at and focus on. And what you want to do is be aware of all of them and pull all of them a little bit and pick and choose. And you get to do whatever you want, kind of, as long as the area under the curve with all the levers you're pulling is sufficient. And it's very liberating. And that's something I really changed my mind on. It's like you don't have to focus on just protein. You don't have to focus on just plants or animals. You don't have to focus on just carbs or fats. You can just kind of step back and look at all of these together, kind of integrate them all. You know what I mean? And so I think that's something I've definitely changed my mind on since the last time.
Wow. So I will confess, Ted, I have not read the whole of the PE diet. Do you know why that is? I need an iPad because it's just mainly digital. Because I think I said to you, "Oh, can I buy the physical copy?" And you were like, "Lawrence, it's massive." Like you weren't doing it, were you? You weren't selling physical hard copies or paperbacks. And then I was going to print it, and I realized I pretty much used an entire like 5 cartridges if I tried to do that. So, anyway, long-winded way of me saying I flicked through, and I love obviously the infographics. I've seen a lot of your graphics over the years and on Instagram and Twitter and that kind of thing. But are you basically saying, and I love this about you, you're saying, maybe in PE diet we put too much emphasis on protein, where now actually I realize it's, like you say, there's lots more levers. And obviously you talk more about now the importance of fiber, food weight, water in food, these kinds of things also contributing to satiety.
Right. Like in the PE diet, I did talk about fiber. I did talk about energy density, but like a 1 page each in a 400-page book. So it's just like, and I apologize because the book was actually written on an iPad, designed for an iPad with fixed ratios.
Not at all.
On the iPad. It's really just for people with an iPad. Like it's
or a very large iPhone.
Buy it.
A very large smartphone, I should say.
Yeah, most people just it's iPad only. Sorry.
No, it's I might. Do you know what? I love it so much. Just looking at it prior to this as well, and I was like, I'm just going to go and buy a tablet just to read this. So help me reconcile this. So obviously you get the protein recommendation we hear a lot, right? 1.6 grams per kilo, 0.7 per gram, I think is the recommendation for optimizing lean muscle gain from strength training. How do you reconcile that with what you just said there about actually people are thriving with low protein intakes? Are we losing something there if we don't optimize it? I'm just curious how you think about that.
I think so. And in fact, these lower protein diets typically have the major downside is bone density. And nobody's really looking with the same scrutiny at muscle quantity, but you'd probably see that there as well. So I do think that you can be equally healthy and have equal longevity, maybe on a lower, without using protein as such a big lever, but you're probably not going to have as good bone density or muscle quantity. You know what I mean? So for me, I am still recommend, while there are many factors that influence satiety per calorie and basically the ad lib caloric intake of people, you still want to prioritize protein because you want the highest lean mass at the lowest fat mass. That's your ultimate goal. And so you want as much bone and muscle as you can get. And so I still love protein. I still focus on protein. I still think that's the biggest pillar of all. And in satiety per calorie, I am also focusing on protein as the most important lever. It's the biggest one, the most powerful one. And for overall body composition, the one people should be looking at the most. And so, yes, I'm absolutely still all about the protein. I've just kind of broadened my view a little bit where that doesn't have to be the only thing you focus on. But yeah, definitely 1.6 grams per kilogram of ideal body weight is like a bare minimum for me. And that does seem to be all you need for optimal muscle synthesis. However, there are reasons to go higher than that if your goal is fat loss, and that's mostly to improve satiety per calorie. And there's fairly good evidence that going higher than that improves satiety per calorie. So for fat loss, so most people are in your community are probably looking at protein in terms of gaining muscle. But I think going even higher is probably more important when it comes to fat loss and satiety per calorie, independent of building more muscle, like going up to 2.2 grams per kilo of ideal body weight. You're not going to build more muscle, but you might very well eat fewer calories on an ad lib diet eating to satiety. In fact, you probably will. So there are reasons to go up on protein percentage just for fat loss, unrelated to building more muscle.
And is that work the same if you're doing like whey shakes just with water, like whey protein is still going to contribute to that outcome?
No. So you always have lower satiety drinking liquids. So there, the more you have to chew something, the higher the satiety per calorie. It's called oral processing time. But if you have to chew something like 1,000 times, you're going to get way more satiety per calorie than if you can just drink it in 10 seconds. So you will always get higher satiety per calorie eating a solid food versus a liquid one. And in fact, there's this whole gradient of surface hardness of foods where if you're trying to eat like a walnut before you've cracked the shell, that's going to give you the most satiety per calorie. But then just something like this, just pure liquid, is going to be lower. And the higher the viscosity, like a gel is more satiating than a liquid, and and a semi-solid is more satiating than a gel, and then a harder and harder and harder solids are going to be even more satiating. And it's all about this chewing time and oral processing and gastric processing, and anything that is harder to digest and slows down the process gives you higher satiety for the calories involved. So a whey shake is not as good as eating real food. However, it's super convenient and it's way better than not having that protein. So that's all on a spectrum as well. Like if you're, if you're in a hurry and you're trying to have some protein with your first meal, yeah, drink a protein shake. It's going to be way better than, not eating anything, being too hungry later, and then just eating some, lower protein, whatever. So I do like whey shakes. I do like protein powder. It's just good to know that it's not quite as good as a solid food. However, you don't want to let perfect be the enemy of good. So whey shakes are good. Protein powder is good. It's not quite as good as solid food, but it's way better than half of the other stuff most people eat. So I don't like, I'm not ever trying to chase perfect. So there's a wide range of things that are good, and these whey shakes are good in my opinion.
If one eats the whey shake, drinks the whey shake, sorry, and are they still likely, as an additional, whatever it is, 20 to 30 grams of protein ingested that day, are they still likely to reduce their overall caloric intake? So it's still going to contribute to satiety if they add that water-based whey protein shake in at, say, 3 p.m. that day. Is that correct?
Absolutely, hell yes. We have a number of studies on this. If you drink a protein shake 3 times a day, half an hour before your meal, you'll automatically eat, over 300 calories less that day.
Wow.
Just on an ad lib.
That's significant.
Diet. Yes, it is significant. That is absolutely worth your time. You will, meal replacement shakes, protein preloads with whey shakes. We have studies on all of this, and people literally just eat less downstream. So it is definitely worth your time. You have to do it before, though. Like if you just eat to satiety of just junk food, you just had as many chocolate chip cookies as you want, and then you try to stuff a whey shake on top of that, it's really not going to help you out at all. But if you preload with these proteins, if you prioritize the protein first and foremost and consume that first, and downstream, you will absolutely eat fewer calories on an ad lib diet. This is proven fact, randomized controlled trials. We know this does work. This is actually not a bad idea. There's plenty of studies just having people drink meal replacement shake or a preload with a protein shake. It does work.
Amazing. That's good to know, because I've just started incorporating that in my new plan today, Ted. When you talk about ideal body weight, when we're trying to calculate protein intake, I've always actually struggled to understand, how do we understand someone's ideal body weight exactly?
It's really, really hard. So I just exclusively go by height. So when I'm dealing with, just general recommendations for the average person, for me, it basically has to be height-based, because you cannot base protein recommendations on someone's actual weight, because everybody's like 1,000 pounds now. You really have to go with some sort of ideal body weight. And since so many people, it used to be you could say, well, just whatever you weighed when you were 18. But, childhood obesity is so rampant and such a big problem now. You can't go by any of that. You can't go by your lowest adult weight or what you weighed in high school, or you really have to just use a reference for height. And so that's a pretty good starting point, in my opinion. Now, there are people who have just way more mesomorphic or endomorphic builds with larger wrists and ankles and a higher bone structure, and you're going to have very big racial and ethnic differences, where certain ethnic groups are going to always be lighter at a certain height, and others are going to be heavier at a certain height just because of bone and muscle and build. And so you have to take it all with a major grain of salt. But I think height is a really good starting point for just an average ballpark reference. What should you weigh type thing? And that's what I tend to use. And I like to give recommendations based on your height because we don't necessarily know otherwise what an ideal body weight is for someone.
So is there a chart you can see online, like ideal weight for height? Is there a chart for that? Is there?
Sure, absolutely. You can just look up, you can just Google, reference weights for height. In the book, what I use is for men, you for 5 feet tall, you give basically men 110 pounds for the first 5 feet, and then 5 pounds for every inch above that. So if you're a 5 foot tall male, the ideal body would be 110. If you're 5'1", it would be 115. If you're 5'2", it would be 120. You're basically adding 5 pounds for each inch over 5 feet, which starts at 110 pounds. For women, it's just 100 pounds at 5 feet, and then also 5 pounds for each additional inch. So a 5 foot woman would be 100 pounds, 5'1" would be 105, 5'2" would be 110. Basically, 110 pounds for the first 5 feet for men, 100 pounds for the first 5 feet for women, and then both go up by 5 pounds per inch. And I apologize for all this being in pounds because I'm locked in America, where the one place on earth where we don't use the metric system. It's so embarrassing. I apologize.
Don't worry. Most people that are listening are American anyway, so it doesn't really matter that much. Random question: dark chocolate thoughts? You dark chocolate fan?
I mean, so I love it. Yes, please. I'll take some. That sounds good. But it's certainly not. I mean, the satiety per calorie is fairly low because it's a high energy density. It's a high fat product. It's a sweetened product that's high in fat and high energy density, and it also sweetened. So you're definitely going to eat more hedonically. Tasty, delicious, love it. Go for it. I think it's way better though than just like really cheap milk chocolate. This is a perfect example of how, if you look at the satiety per calorie score, dark chocolate's way better than your just cheap Hershey's bar type, very high sugar, much lower quality milk chocolate. So yeah, when it comes to chocolates, this is a swap that for me is great because it has a higher satiety per calorie. It's not something that is, on the satiety per calorie scale, which goes from like 0 to 100, it's fairly low, but it's way higher than inferior chocolates. So I like dark chocolate. I mean, it's great.
Is there an issue with the caffeine content? So eating it later in the evening?
I mean, like you've got chocolate has some theophylline in it, and it is going to have a caffeine-like effect on people. Personally, I drink so much coffee that the theophylline effect from chocolate is like a drop in the bucket for me. So I don't even notice. But there are some people out there who are, maybe not haven't built up the same tolerance I do, who might actually have some issues from it. So that's certainly possible that someone's sensitive enough that that's an issue. I would say for most people, it's not that big a deal. Yeah.
So you can, I know you drink a tremendous amount of coffee. Does it have an effect on the, your sleep quality? If you become quite adapted to drinking a lot of coffee, then it doesn't affect your sleep quite so bad. Is that kind of what you were saying there?
Oh, well, I mean, so basically there are so many genetic differences. So some people are rapid metabolizers of caffeine.
I'm a rapid metabolizer. Yeah.
Right on. And it just doesn't bother them that much. Other people metabolize it more slowly, and they just can't drink any caffeine after, noon or definitely, late afternoon, or it's going to affect their sleep quality. So that is a thing for a lot of people. It's just infinitely variable based on the individual. And then you also downregulate the effect the more caffeine you consume, So if you're a rapid metabolizer and you're consuming huge amounts, it's just not going to bother you. If you metabolize it slowly and you hardly ever have it, it's going to keep you awake, and that's going to.
Sorry, is that an acute observation or a chronic thing? Like if you're consuming it chronically, it might not affect you so much, or is it acutely if you have a large amount that day, or both?
It's chronic. It's chronic,
Okay.
yeah. So
Yeah.
you basically downregulate the effect if you have large amounts chronically.
Got it. Okay. You're now making me think of my stepfather who will have a coffee at like 11 p.m. And well, he says, oh, he still sleeps perfect. I would still argue his quality of his sleep is probably not that great. Maybe his quantity is fine, but his quality is
Mhm.
somewhat diminished. I don't know whether, because I think even someone who's like a really fast caffeine metabolizer, if they're only having it like just before bed, the half-life of caffeine, like surely it's still going to have an impact, right?
Yeah, right, absolutely.
Right.
So it's not completely effect free, even in rapid metabolizers here are consuming huge amounts. But it's sort of it takes about a week or so to up or down regulate the effect it's going to have on you. So like if you consume no caffeine for an entire week, 1 to 2 weeks, you're going to be about as sensitive as you get to caffeine. So then when you do have it, you're going to feel it more. You're going to have more of an effect. Versus if you're just consuming a whole bunch for a week or two, you'll downregulate that effect. So it's when I say chronic, it is on the time scale of about a week or two for you to up or down regulate the effect that it has on you.
Got it. Okay. And how much do you drink these days?
Oh gosh, I don't even really track. I mean, I just have I have about, let's see, 60 ounces a day, maybe.
What is that in terms of cups?
Oh gosh. I mean, a cup is 8 ounces. Well, a cup of coffee is, I think, 6 ounces for some
Okay,
ridiculous
10.
reason. But a regular American cup is 8 ounces. So that's, I guess 5 cups a day.
5, yeah. That's not too well. I mean, look, what are we talking about? It doesn't sound like it's bad. Doesn't sound like I don't know the literature. You probably do, Ted. That it's going to have any negative effect on your health span. Drinking that
I
much.
mean, coffee is just 100% awesome in the epidemiology.
You're
So, like
right.
coffee drinkers, they live longer. They have lower rates of diabetes, lower rates of obesity, lower rates of Alzheimer's and dementia, lower rates of Parkinsonism. There's a huge list of things that coffee drinkers and tea drinkers have less of than people who don't drink coffee or tea. So it's overwhelmingly positive in the scientific literature. Most of this is epidemiological, of course, but
Right.
the at least directionally, that's very reassuring that
But
it's
it could have
probably good.
a lot of healthy user bias in there, though, right? As well, we drink more coffee. We like
Absolutely.
doing yoga and strength training, and
Right. Yeah. There's a
but
ton of confounders there. But
right.
I think if coffee was bad for you, we'd see a signal of that in the
Mm.
epidemiology. We'd see some sort of signal in the scientific literature. And we really see the opposite. So I actually think that these light stimulants are kind of good for increasing metabolism, fat loss, like green tea, catechins. These are actually really good um, substances, and they seem to be in the medical literature and the epidemiology quite good. Like, there's no reason to not consume these things. So I like coffee. I like tea. I don't see any reason to avoid them. Yeah.
Interesting. This is a big digression, but it's interesting. Tell me more about the tea, green tea. How does this help with fat loss? Can you talk more on that?
Right. So green tea has these catechins in them that basically increase metabolic rate to some extent. You get more fat release from your fat cells. Your metabolism goes up slightly. There are also some really good satiety effects from green tea. So green tea is particularly awesome when it comes to fat loss. There are just a few substances that are helpful if your goal is fat loss, and caffeine is absolutely one of them. Green tea and these catechins is another. And the third one is capsaicin, anything hot or spicy, literally going to give you a microscopic benefit if your goal is fat loss. So I literally like green tea, hot sauce, caffeine, as long, and when I say coffee, I'm talking like, black coffee or maybe minimal additives, not like your Trenta Frappuccino at Starbucks or whatever, which is, yeah. But these things are all lightly beneficial and lightly helpful. I mean, they're all like 1% items or
Mm.
less. So it's not the biggest rock in the jar. Nobody should be building their whole program around how much green tea can I consume. But it is a very useful thing. And if you're looking for something to drink that is probably going to make you less hungry versus more hungry, that's in the way that some beverages might. An unsweetened or artificially sweetened green tea is an excellent choice.
Interesting. When you say green tea, is that doesn't include peppermint tea? It has to be like green tea, does it? Is there rules around that?
I mean, your peppermint tea could be made out of a green tea
Right.
leaf, so that might be. Um, I'm not exactly sure what your traditional peppermint tea uses for a tea leaf base. You know what I'm saying? So it might be the same thing.
Okay. This is really interesting because now one of the rules I'm trying to adhere to myself is to finish eating. So I eat dinner, might have a small dessert afterwards. And then we put the kids to bed. And then it's like, that's it. There's no eating after that meal, right? It's kind of one of the rules. And I find, let's say I've had a really small dinner, and let's say I am kind of hungry at about 8 or 9 p.m. Having like a green tea, because I normally have some kind of what's the tea I'm drinking right now? Oh man, it's like ginger and turmeric or something like that. And maybe that has a similar effect. But yeah, having some kind of green tea, like I know what you're saying, like this could be like such a negligible effect, but it sounds like it could be helpful and certainly made consistent. And if it stops you from overeating as well, then that's going to have that added byproduct benefit there as well. Yeah.
Right, absolutely. Yeah, there's just a very light anorectic quality to these green teas, and you can see that in the fact that nobody's eating a food when they drink green tea.
Yeah.
So like if you drink coffee, you could have a pastry with a coffee, no problem, or a Danish or a biscotti or a cookie, or sure, those go together great. But nobody's drinking green tea and then eating something, you know what I'm saying? And there's kind of a little bit of a reason for that. So it is a particularly great thing to consume if you're just trying to not drink something and not eat something. So I am a big green tea fan. Of course, it does have a mild stimulant effect that might screw some people up at bedtime, but not me.
I see. I see. So it does have what kind of stimulant does it have in it?
I mean, it just has a little bit of caffeine. There's a non-zero amount of caffeine.
Today's episode is sponsored by Imagine Strength, the game changer in safe, simple, and effective high-intensity training machines. When it comes to HIIT, Imagine Strength is your go-to for intelligently designed, efficient, and affordable equipment. Their team is passionate about HIIT, and it shows in every piece they craft. So why are Imagine Strength the right choice? Number one, they tailor-make their equipment for HIIT studios. Number two, they provide cost-effective solutions for your business. And number three, they are committed to ongoing innovation and refinement. Ready to take your HIIT business to the next level? Visit imaginestrength.com to discuss your needs and find the perfect gear for your studio. Join the HIIT revolution of Imagine Strength and transform your workout experience today.
Got it. Okay, interesting. All right, good stuff. Tell me something that's true that almost nobody agrees with you on in relation to health, fitness, and nutrition.
So I think that body composition equals metabolic health almost completely. So looking healthy and being healthy is very, very much overlapped to the point of almost being identical. And that's, when you get to the extremes of bodybuilding, that's definitely not true. Where all these, super thin people feel like they're going to die. But for the most part, looking good and being healthy internally, metabolically, is so much overlap that it's almost the same thing from a first order approximation, in my opinion. And a lot of people don't agree with me. They're like, oh, well, you could be really healthy and look overweight, or you could be look really healthy, but inside you're not, you know what I mean? And I don't know. I don't really agree with that necessarily. So I think that looking healthy and being healthy is very much, there's so much overlap in that Venn diagram that they're almost the same thing.
What about if someone's got a really high personal fat threshold and they might not look as aesthetically optimal? With that, how do you reconcile that?
That would definitely make them just as insulin sensitive as someone who didn't. But you would probably have other downstream health impacts, such as degenerative joint disease of the large weight-bearing joints. You're going to have way more osteoarthritis of the hips and knees in someone who weighs a lot more than ideal, even if they have really good insulin sensitivity because they have such a high personal fat threshold. So I still think there might be some downsides to that. Although from an insulin sensitivity point of view, yes, if you have a really high personal fat threshold, you could look a lot fatter than someone who didn't and actually be healthier from a metabolic point of view. So that's a really good black swan too.
Okay.
What I would say.
Fascinating. Is there anything that you believe, again, in the realm of health, fitness, and nutrition that you believe to be true, but you can't prove it? Maybe it's that. I don't know.
That I believe to be true, but I can't prove it. Well, okay, I honestly believe that the single most important factor of all when it comes to the obesity epidemic is satiety per calorie of your food choices. I believe that. I can't prove it yet, but I really believe that's what it comes down to. And I believe that a lot of the exercise differences we see between obese and non-obese persons are downstream of that. And the way I think that works is that, let's say all of a sudden you start choosing foods that are low in satiety per calorie. So you're just automatically overeating calories all day, every day, day in, day out. And you're getting a larger and larger and larger body size. As your body size goes up, the amount of energy you have to expend just to be alive goes up as well, because your basal metabolic rate is most related to body size, and most of your energy expenditure is basal metabolic rate. So basically, you have to expend more and more energy to just sit on the couch with a larger body. And then you automatically exercise less because of constrained energy. And, everyone has a constrained energy system going on where you don't want to expend too much energy. So you're just going to automatically move less as you get a larger body. And so I think that trying to blame the obesity epidemic on, oh, well, we're just all exercising less than we used to. It's probably the food first. I think you consume these low satiety per calorie foods, you automatically eat more, you get a larger body size, you want to move less due to a constrained energy model. And then you've got people who just eat a lot of calories and don't expend a lot of calories with physical activity. And I think you can reverse all that by just simply choosing foods with higher satiety per calorie. You automatically eat fewer calories, you automatically have a little smaller body size, and then you're going to automatically exercise more just to have the same calorie burn. And so personally, I think the entire epidemic really comes down to food choice and satiety per calorie. And that's something that I can't prove, like I said, yet, but that's my universal theory.
So effectively what you're saying is that getting it right in terms of satiety per calorie and food choices is the Trojan horse. It's the catalyst for making change everywhere else.
That's exactly right. That's what I think. Now, now that's not to say you couldn't drive things in reverse. You could just force yourself to do a huge volume of exercise. And when you do that, you start matching your intake to your expenditure much, much better. And you would basically burn up all the extra calories you're eating from the low satiety per calorie food choices, and you wouldn't overeat because you're matching intake to expenditure better. So you could reverse the whole process with just exercise alone. It would just be
A lot
harder and a little bit steeper uphill battle. But that kind of goes back to my original point, which is that you have lots of different levers and you can focus on any of them and be successful. I'm just saying for the average person, I think the diet issue comes first and is more prominent. But you could unwind your whole obesity problem with just exercise alone, just by doing huge volumes of cardio and caloric burn. I think that is absolutely possible.
Very interesting. And this is something that which you and I spoke about last time. I was kind of saying how I felt like I was underplaying the role that exercise played with fat loss. And we went through a lot of the fat loss or fat loss related benefits that exercise and resistance training has. And I'll just quickly summarize those, and you can tell me if I'm missing any out. But there's obviously increasing acute energy expenditure. There's increasing metabolism chronically by adding lean mass. There's improving satiety signaling, so getting more in touch with hunger and fullness. There's preventing the big rebound, which happens when one diets without resistance training. So they lose a whole bunch of muscle and fat, and then their resting metabolic rate drops. They feel they need to eat more in order to, they're not burning as many calories per day, and so they just regain that weight. So you see a lot of that yo-yoing happening. And lastly, the lower total daily energy expenditure makes it harder not to overeat. So the more active we are, the better we get at matching. It's what you were just saying, matching intake to energy expenditure, which again links to our ability to signal satiety. So, and then if we're extremely active, then your energy expenditure could be well over your intake, in which case you lose even more fat, which is, it's funny because this, actually, let me stop there for a second. Is that everything in terms of resistance training, in terms of the fat loss benefit? Is there anything that you think I might be missing there? Or exercise
No,
in
I
general?
think that's pretty comprehensive. That's
Yeah.
a very good list. I like that a lot.
Yeah. And I will say, obviously, when you're extremely active, there are other potential risks, such as overtraining and injuries, depending on what you're doing, etc. So we're kind of talking independent of that. So, however, all of that said, although you can pull all those levers to improve fat loss, obviously diet is still going to be the most efficient and effective way. I mean, this is something that I guess a lot of the guys in the kind of high intensity training space will advocate for is, yeah, you can either do a ton of exercise and run a whole marathon, or you could just like not eat 2 donuts, or, or just eat less kind of high calorie junk food. And that's going to be a way more efficient way to lose the fat. And obviously what we really want to do is what you've been alluding to during this podcast is pull all the levers, right? Or pull as many of them in a little bit as possible. So there's one thing that does confuse me though. And you and I exchanged some emails way back. I don't expect you to remember this. You might do. You get probably like 1,000 emails a day, Ted. So, and it was I messaged you and I said, hey, Ted, I'm confused. A lot of people are really like, saying that, exercise really does nothing for fat loss. And you sent me a couple of studies, and you sent me this graph, and I can literally screen share if you can't remember it. But it's a graph where you've got Western population versus is it Pima Indian? Is that how you say it? Pima.
Pima.
Mm-hmm. Pima Indian tribe, I assume, and it shows their total daily energy expenditure. And it shows their body composition and their BMI, and their total daily energy expenditure is basically the same. It's like the Western group is like 2.8K, and the Pima group is 3,000 calories. But the Western group has 41% body fat, and the Pima group has 29% body fat. So massive difference. And you made the point that it's because they're doing twice the physical activity. They're doing, what is it? 20,000 steps per day. Oh no, sorry, this is a different group. You're talking about the Hadza. But the point is there's a significant difference in the step count or the physical activity. But where I get confused is, okay, so they're consuming the same caloric amount, I believe, and they're burning the same energy. So how come one group is better body composition than the other? How does that work? I don't, because you kind of just hinted at it just now. You talked about how people that are very fat still burn a large number of calories. I think I don't understand the physiology here, and I was hoping you could explain that to me. Does that make sense?
Got it. So basically, and we know this from all of Herman Ponzer's work, everyone's eating and burning the same amount of calories, period. You're just gonna eat a certain amount of calories and you're gonna burn a certain amount of calories. And everyone's eating the calories of a moderately active version of themselves. So if you're not, your body likes a fairly high energy flux, eating a lot, burning a lot. You're going to burn the calories and eat the calories of a moderately active version of yourself, and everyone's eating and burning the same amount of calories. You can either burn those calories by being 300 pounds and just sitting motionless on your couch all day, you're going to burn 3,000 calories. Or you could be the skinniest Hadza anybody's ever seen, and you walk for 2.5 miles a day. You've got a step count over 20,000. You're going to eat and burn the exact same amount of calories.
But I don't understand that, because I think I've always been taught to think burning calories means energy leaving the body. But is that not what we're saying here?
Yes. So the biggest component of your metabolism and your source of burning calories every day is just basal metabolic rate, maintaining your body size. That is the single biggest component. So the biggest factor in terms of how many calories any animal burns every day, it's just the size of its body. So someone with a large body size is going to burn way more calories just being alive than someone with a much smaller body size. That is the single biggest component. That is why Western males average weight 198 pounds. Sorry, pounds again. Eating fairly similar calories to the Hadza, who the males weigh like a 145 or something. It's like just, way lighter body weights, but similar caloric intake and burn, because it's a trade-off between having a larger body, you burn calories sitting there. Having a smaller body, you burn calories running around. And everyone's going to, at the end of the day, consume and burn a similar amount. It's not a crazy difference between them.
Okay.
Now, there are some slight differences. Like the larger obese persons do eat, 25% more calories than lean persons. But they're basically burning more calories just being motionless. The leaner persons will burn with physical activity.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if that makes sense, but
you know what? Hopefully it makes sense to everyone who's listening. It just doesn't 100% make sense to me. It's just so confusing to me. I knew this was going to happen, Ted. I'm going to ask this question. Ted's going to answer it really eloquently and articulately. I'm still not going to get it. And I think at some point we'll probably just have to move on. That's happened, by the way, with me and James Steele. We talk about some really complex scientific paper. And there was a point where I didn't understand what he was saying. And I was like, okay, James, let's move on. And then I think I texted him like a week later and said, James, I get it. I understand now. But anyway, I digress. Okay. I still don't quite get it. Maybe I just need to think about this in my own time rather than annoy all the listeners. Go ahead.
I don't know if I could. Basically, you can either burn calories by just having a giant body and sitting motionless, or by having a smaller body running around all day, and you're going to have a similar calorie burn.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that makes sense. Because just being alive, you have all these metabolic processes in your body that consume calories. And so the biggest determinant of how many calories any animal eats is just its size. That's why like an elephant eats, like, I don't know how many calories a day, and a mouse eats like way less. So body size is the biggest determinant. And so you're going to eat, certain amount of calories no matter what. And then you can either be fatter and just sit there, or be thinner and run around more to have the same calorie burn.
Mm-hmm. I think I get it. I am definitely going to think more about it, because if I try and do that now on this very podcast, it's probably not going to be the best format for it. But no, I'm kind of getting there. It makes a lot more sense. So I'll drop you an email if I need any clarifications.
It's not that intuitive though. So like
I think that's what you're
saying. It's really not very intuitive at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. So then just can we like, maybe this will help me understand it better, extrapolate that out a little bit. So you take those two groups from that graph you sent me, right? And you're familiar with, the graph I'm talking about. It sounds like you remember the graph or the data. Is that correct?
Oh, I think they were looking at Pima Indians in their native location versus in America. And there's a very big difference in body fat percentage, and a very big difference in physical activity levels. But they're all kind of eating and burning the same amount of calories. Yeah, so I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, it was called Total Daily Energy Expenditure in Different Populations was the name. Similar dietary intakes, huge difference in activity and BMI. So let's take the Western group that are very over fat. what would change here? So let's say they up their physical activity to the same as the Pima Indian.
Mhm.
What would we see differently? Would we just see they would essentially what, burn the same this is where I get confused. What would happen if they cranked it up? They would just burn those
Right.
calories as fuel. They would just burn that fat. Yeah, this is where I get confused. Yeah, I know.
They
That's
would basically just start
yeah.
weighing less and less. So
Mhm.
as you increase physical activity, because your body has this constrained energy model thing going on, where you just really only want to burn a certain amount of calories and you want to conserve energy.
Right.
If you're doing tons of physical activity, that is going to incentivize your body to weigh less. So your basal metabolic rate is less expensive. So you're just going to get smaller and smaller and smaller as your
Right.
physical activity ramps up. So, and that's how it works. That's the magic of this sort of constrained energy thing going on. If you burn more and more calories, your body will be incentivized to be smaller because you don't want to burn calories having a huge body and also burn a ton of calories with physical activity. So it's kind of a seesaw. It's sort of a
I
trade-off between physical
see.
activity and larger body size. You can have a larger body size and less physical activity, or a smaller body size and more physical activity, and they're seesawing like that. Your body's constraining energy, so you're not going to do both.
Which is for survival, obviously. That energy constraint. Yeah.
Right. Yeah,
Click.
yeah.
I get it, Ted.
Mhm.
I'm with you. Finally, we got there. No, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you for that. That is very, very fascinating, actually. Wow. Okay. Hopefully, that was interesting to listeners, and makes sense to you as much as it does to me now. Um, so obviously, you're working with patients all the time in your in the clinic, and I'm just really curious. Assuming you still recommend resistance training to a lot of them, and I understand that many of them probably won't do it. But of those who do it, what do you see in terms of improvements? And specifically, like the health markers. I'm just curious, independent of everything else, when you see someone doing resistance training, I'd love to hear what you see improve.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I basically demand that everyone does resistance training. I'll literally write it down as a prescription. Like, you have to do resistance training at least twice a week, full body, push pull legs twice a week, full body. I know people in the high intensity crowd would argue that once a week is plenty, or maybe once every 2 weeks. But I think most of my Gen Pop clients or patients, if you want to call them that, cannot produce the intensity required to to get where you want to go with one week. You know what I mean? So I'm like at least twice a week, full body, push pull legs, and I definitely see like massive improvements. So like I've had patients who were their diabetes was just steadily getting worse and worse and worse and worse. And as soon as they start doing resistance training and really get into it and really embrace it, and being very formal about it, some people are like, "Well, yeah, I try to do some push-ups here and there." And I'm like, "No, you're gonna map it out. You're gonna have a structure. You're gonna have a schedule. You're gonna have, 2 particular times a week. You're gonna have certain exercises that are gonna hit these different movement patterns, these muscle groups." And when people really do that, always all your diabetic and insulin sensitivity markers get better just immediately. We see lower fasting glucose, fasting triglycerides, fasting insulin, A1C, all these things get better. Typically every single thing you can measure improves. And so resistance training is huge. It's an absolute requirement. I pretty much demand it out of everyone. And what the biggest problem with diabetes is that your number one glucose disposal organ is your skeletal muscle. And when people are, I have a lot of people with this like super bad skinny fat, like normal weight obesity, where you're so sarcopenic and osteopenic that your weight's okay, but you're just extremely fluffy. You just have tons of fat and hardly any lean mass. And these people have brutal diabetic problems. They just can't get their blood sugar down at all until they start building muscle. And then they get so much more insulin sensitive at the muscle level that blood sugar just goes way down, and it's huge, it's massive, and I pretty much demand it of everybody. So yeah, resistance training is absolutely critical. I can't emphasize enough how important that is. Everyone has to do it, and I basically demand it of everyone who walks in the door.
And how quickly do you see these markers improve from resistance training with your patients?
I mean, you could see, so it's typically a fairly slow process of building muscle, like really slow. But because when people are doing these workouts to failure, they're depleting so much intramuscular triglyceride and glucose. You will see insulin sensitivity improvements like, within a week or two. I'll have patients with a Freestyle Libre sensor and they're just tracking all their blood sugars and they're horribly diabetic. And as soon as they start working out, you can just literally see a drop in their overall the floor, the baseline of their glucose curve on their glucometer will just be lower very rapidly. I mean, I would say within a week or two. And that's before they've even built any muscle at all. You're just depleting muscular fuels, intramuscular triglycerides and glycogen, and just doing that. So to really be diabetic, you have to have all three of your storage depots completely full. All your fat cells have to be full, and you're spilling fat over out of your subcutaneous cells into the bloodstream, and your triglycerides are high, into visceral fat. Your liver has to be completely full. 100% of type 2 diabetics have fatty liver, full stop. By definition, to be diabetic, you have to fill up your fat cells, fill up your liver, and have your muscle filled with fuel as well, so that your skeletal muscle cells are not accepting more fat or glucose. So you have to fill up all three storage depots to be severely diabetic and have hyperglycemia: muscle, liver, and fat cells. And the second you deplete one of those, your blood sugar comes way down. You could just fast and not eat for a day or two. Liver glycogen and triglyceride comes down. Your fatty liver is better, and your diabetes is better. You're less diabetic. You could just do a couple glycogen depletion workouts, and all of a sudden your muscle has more storage room, and your blood sugar comes way down. The fat loss is the hardest part. Like actually shrinking down all your fat cells takes, weeks. But even there, we'll see these studies where people go on crash diets and just 4 weeks, 8 weeks, 12 weeks, bariatric surgery, low energy diets, these 800-calorie formula diets. Anything you do where you also shrink down your fat cells very rapidly, your diabetes just collapses and just goes away. So fixing any one of these storage depots is massive, and resistance exercise does that for skeletal muscle. Not only is it depleting these fuels and giving you immediate improvements, but over the long term, you're getting more and more muscle. So you have a bigger storage depot and better disposal. And now you can burn way more glucose when you're doing the workouts. And so it just spirals upwards. You get more and more insulin sensitive. You get a bigger and bigger storage depot in your muscle. And eventually, you're just not diabetic at all. So yeah, resistance training is huge. It's one of the three big, storage depots that you're cleaning out when you train. So I love it.
Yeah. It's amazing to me, like how, like you say, the physiological stuff, the superficial aesthetic, the muscle gain can take a lot longer. To see the physical change, improvement on someone can take longer. But those health markers you mentioned can literally change within a week or two. Markers can improve from just like, a couple of weeks of just changing this stuff. It's amazing.
It is amazing. And exercise is the fastest way to be healthier. Like if you're trying to cure your diabetes, exercise is the very fastest way. I mean, on the diet side, the fastest you can go is just not eating. But you can always ramp up exercise volume and intensity and frequency and just burn more and more calories and dispose of more and more fuel. So exercise is the fastest. It's definitely, if you're like, okay, I got to be healthier right now, tomorrow, yesterday, exercise is going to get you there the fastest. So that's why I'm just a huge fan. And I used to be like, which is more important, diet or exercise? Diet or exercise? It really is just like straight down the middle. You cannot say one of them's more important than the other. Honestly, if you put a gun to my head and made me choose one or the other, diet or exercise, I would probably go with exercise.
Wow.
I hate to say it. Yep. But it's really 50-50, and you just really want to be, thinking about both of them.
Cool. I love it. Bit of a random one. It's a very selfish question. So in my household, there's been a lot of, I would say, kind of mild sickness, right? Like just kind of non-serious, but really annoying coughs and colds and headaches and sinus infections and general infections and fevers and things. I'm relatively healthy. I've fallen off the wagon a small bit, but I had a health test, was it like a blood panel done recently, and all my numbers are like really in the kind of good range and very, very extremely low risk range, shall we say. And my body composition is, I'm probably like 15% body fat or something, I don't know. But anyways, so I was again talking to a friend about it. So I was getting like really kind of annoyed about it. So I was like, my sleep's been a bit off, I'm sleeping probably some nights like 6.5, 7 hours. But been through a bit of sleep deprivation there. Obviously, the kids are in daycare. They're bringing home all sorts of crap and viruses and things, and from the crash, germs and stuff. Added on to that, my diet could be better, right? There's probably a small amount of overeating some days, and maybe there could be better, like composition of the diet. And my stress has been kind of high at times. So I was thinking, is it simply a case of like, if I dialed all those things in, so I know you're being kind of a doctor to me right now, Ted. If I dialed all those things in, would I mitigate a lot of that kind of mild sickness, right? Or is it simply like, young kids bringing home viruses, nothing you can really do about it. It's just is what it is. It's that season of life. We're talking like there's almost something every month for like the last 6 months, that type of thing. So curious, like if you've got any thoughts on that.
Yeah, no, it's really, you can blame it on your kids entirely. So
Okay.
you have
I will.
A 2-year-old and a 4-year-old, and these kids are basically naive to every virus on the planet, and they will just steadily get every single viral respiratory illness one after another in daycare, and that's their job right now, is to get every single virus and make antibodies against it. And so the virus vector load from these kids is off the charts. And basically every doctor in training will tell you that when they did their peds rotations in medical school or whatever, they were just sick the whole time. That's certainly happened to me. And you basically are just dealing with a massive quantity of a viral exposure. And you're just going to get sick more. And then you throw in the fact that when you have little kids, your sleep is just craters. It's having kids under the age of 4 is really just a marathon of sleep deprivation. You're lucky to be alive. And then your diet is garbage. Like you're basically just living off whatever scraps your kids don't eat. So you're just like crumbs from goldfish crackers is like your entire diet when you have kids that age. Like I didn't exercise ever when I had kids, under the age of like 3. So your diet, you're just trying to be alive. It's just a survival. Like you don't have the luxury of extra sleep. You don't have any kind of time to work out. Your diet is just whatever crumbs and scraps your kids aren't eating. And you just have to like survive. Once you can get them all to around 4 or 5, it gets a lot better, and then life kind of comes back. Also, they start becoming immune to all these viruses. But I think you're just screwed right now. Like that, there's nothing you could do to not be getting sick. The average person gets 6 viral respiratory illnesses a year. People who are really, really healthy, they might barely notice. People who have less viral exposure in their day might get a little fewer of these. But when you have little kids, you're just exposed to so many viruses. They're just bags of viruses, to be honest. So it's just there's not much you can do about it. And I wouldn't like blame yourself. I would blame your kids, to be honest. It's terrible, but it's true.
So what age is it where that starts to diminish? So like 4 or 5 years old, they start to.
Yeah,
why
absolutely.
That?
That's really gonna tail off.
Mm-hmm.
By if you can get everybody to be about 4 or so, you're going to be way better off in every way.
Fascinating. Okay, well that makes it feel a lot better. I still should obviously improve on those other things. They'd help, I assume, won't they?
Yeah, well, probably not. Like, I mean, maybe a little, but if you just basically like lived on your super yacht and you had a team of live-in nannies just doing all the child care and your personal chef, your personal trainer, and you're just laying by the pool and everything was, awesome. And then, yeah, okay, you might get possibly slightly less cold, but the reality is you're just going to get sick
It's a
more
day
than
of
you
the
ever
life
will
for
get.
me, Ted. That's just standard day in the life.
That's right.
Yeah, podcast business is doing well. No, so okay, so effectively, what you're saying is that you could be optimally, you could be getting your style and everything in perfect, like diet, training, sleep, everything we've talked about today. And if you got two kids going to daycare all day and they're coming home bringing all the stuff, you're just stuffed. There's nothing you can do. Right?
Absolutely. Yeah, I
Right.
don't care how healthy someone is. If they get exposed to measles and they haven't had a measles vaccine, they're getting measles. Like some of these viruses are so virulent that you're just screwed. I don't care. You could be the healthiest fire breathing CrossFitter with perfect body composition, and you could you're just going to get sick from some
Right.
of these things, and it's not you are going to get more sick if you're unhealthy and less sick if you're healthy. So that's always worth your time. But it would be a mistake to say that if someone got a virus and were sick to any degree from it, it's just their fault because they weren't healthy enough at baseline. That's just not true.
I think the problem is as well is when you get sick, it's then the habits that happen after that. So when you're sick and you're like, you start getting cravings for bad food because you want to feel better because it gives you that whatever it is, that dopamine, short-term dopamine hit, whatever. You don't, you're sort of laying there feeling sorry for yourself, so you stay up late and watch, Who is Aaron Carter on Netflix, right? Which I'm enjoying right now, and and so yeah. Do you have any thoughts on that, on how you might curb that kind of slippery slope?
Not really. I mean, that happens to everyone. It's basically part of the human existence. Like when you're really sick, nothing's optimal and you're just trying to survive. And so I don't have a lot of good advice there, except for empathy, because we've all been there for sure.
Thank you. Well, in a kind of weird kind of way, I kind of like what you said. So look, before we wrap up, Ted, I have to ask you about your own habits and routines. I love hearing about how these things have evolved, or even if they're still the same, that's interesting too. But I guess I'm always trying to figure out how can I make healthy eating and healthy living more routinized, and I love making it really kind of frictionless. So I'd love to hear what are your like routines that you have at the moment that really help you stick to your training, your activity levels, your diet, etc. Can you share a few of those?
Yeah, and I love that because the more external setup you have, the easier it is for you to do all these things, the better. So you just want everything just in place, and it's just, I mean, habit, routine, and just so much easier. So one thing that I like to do is meal prep and meal plan. So I will like look at the week, decide which days I'm going to cook, decide what I'm going to cook, and then I'm such a lazy sack of crap that I just basically order all my groceries delivered, right? So I know exactly what days I'm going to cook, what I'm going to make. I'm going to do all this meal prep. I have my groceries delivered. I cook all these meals and have them in little containers, basically, right? And then I can just grab one of those and go to work. And so I have pretty much this whole external setup around the diet where all the things that I know I'm going to snack on, I have available, and all the meal prep stuff that I need, I have available, and it's all just right there. So I have all this external setup when it comes to every part of my diet. I have whatever my non-caloric beverages are. I've got set up and in place. Whatever protein shakes or protein powders I'm going to consume, I've got it right there. All my fruits and vegetables, all my lean proteins, all these things are basically just right there. And the easier you make it for yourself, the more likely you're gonna follow through and not just like go to the gas station and buy a bag of Doritos or something like that. So yeah, I definitely have this all kind of mapped out and meal prepped and routinized. And I break the protocol here and there. I will go out to eat and have a cheat meal and just enjoy it or whatever. But, it's like an 80-20 thing. So for 80% of the time, it's meal prepped and I know what I'm having and it's all right there in front of me. Um, yeah. So same thing with exercise, right? I have all these planned exercise things just built into my day. So like I have a standing desk at work. I don't even have a chair in my office. I'm literally just standing all day long. I only sit down when I'm talking to a patient if they're sitting down. I have, in case the weather's bad, I've got Peloton in my garage. I got a Concept 2 rower. I got a treadmill. I've got like things right there where I can do my cardio in the house. I've got pull-up bars, I've got dumbbells, I've got barbells, I've got free weights, I've got anything I need to do resistance training at home right there, anything I need to do cardio if the weather's bad right there. I'm building all this stuff into my day just automatically,
Mm-hmm.
And I have it planned out. I know when I'm going to work out. I know what roughly what workouts I'm going to do. And the more of this I've set up externally, the easier it is to just be compliant, and consistency is everything. So if you can just be consistent most of the time, and it's just so much easier, you know what I mean? And if I was just kind of going meal to meal and not really knowing what I was going to do for food, what I was going to do to exercise, it would be so much harder. It would be really, really order of magnitude more difficult to get where I'm at. So I absolutely highly recommend, meal prep, planning, cooking, having food ready to go, planning out your schedule, when you're going to work out, what workout you're going to do, and mapping this stuff out and just building it into your routine is so critical. I mean, because at the end of the day, you're going to do whatever's easy. And if it's easy to do all the right stuff, you're going to win. Like, it's golden. So you have to make it easy. You have to make it almost easier to do the good stuff than the not as good stuff. So it's all about making it really, really easy and all set up.
This is Atomic Habits 101, isn't it? The habit creation
absolutely.
side of it. Yeah. Do you remember that what's it? It's 4 steps, isn't it? It's like, do you remember the 4 steps? Maybe we can quickly bring it up, actually, because I really want to
I don't, but I did love, I'm a huge fan.
Yeah, let me just get it here quickly because it's really useful. So you have the cue, you have the whatever it is, the shoes by the door. I always, not necessarily a huge advocate of jogging, but I'm just saying that. You got the trainers by the front door as the cue. Okay, yeah, I'm going running or whatever. Then you got the craving. So you got the whatever it is. There's some part of the habit that you're looking forward to experiencing, right? So the problem with junk food is that craving is obviously that that sort of like a dopamine hit you get immediately after starting eating. The response, which I can't remember the response phase. Do you remember what that part of the habit formation is? Is that how you feel instantly? Yeah, I think that's the acute feeling you get from doing X or whatever it is. So like that kind of positive emotion you experience. And then you got number 4, reward. So cue, craving, response, reward. So reward is something you could program in. It's something that could be organic. So if it's resistance training, I think it's so easy for me to habitualize that because, it's like when you sit down after a training session, you just feel jacked because you're so pumped. Even if you're slightly like you and I, Ted, you look fantastic, by the way, I just want to add. But you get that awesome feeling where you just feel like, I don't know what it is, like, blood pumping to the muscle, and you just get just feel all those chemicals going through you, and you got all this, whatever it is, BDNF driving through the brain, and you just feel so creative. At least I do. So that is a reward, but that reward could be something artificial. It could be like, when I do my workout, I go to my favorite coffee shop and have my favorite, whatever, a mocha or whatever it is. And so like, it's using the 4 stages of habit to make these new habits as easy to adhere to and do as possible. So no, thought I'd just share that. It might be helpful to people. Ted,
I love it.
Okay, cool. Appreciate that. I've just realized the time. So we'll certainly wrap up there. This has been amazing as always. I'm really grateful for your time, learning so much. I feel so motivated actually after talking to you today. I always do. I should talk to you more. But just remind us, where should we send people, to learn about what you're working on? So you got the book, Diet Doctor. Do you want to just elaborate on all that and tell us the links if you have them?
Right. Yeah. So I wrote a book called The PE Diet, and you can find it anywhere online books are sold, Amazon or whatever, or you can go to thepediet.com or tednaiman.com and buy a PDF copy of it, which is a lot less expensive. So I recommend that. And then you can find me on social media at Ted Naiman. You mostly, I guess, X, formerly Twitter, and Instagram at Ted Naiman. I'm working with Dr. Andreas Einfeld and the Diet Doctor team on Hava, and the website there is hava.co. Or you can go to satietypercalorie.com and see a little teaser there. But we're working on this app that helps people evaluate food in terms of satiety per calorie, looking at all these different levers. So you can check out hava.co, satietypercalorie.com. Check out the PE Diet at thepediet.com or tednaiman.com. And just hunt me down on social media. Like I said, I'm a regular primary care doctor in the Seattle area, but my practice is closed to new patients. I only see people really in person in Washington. I'm only licensed in Washington State, so I'm not doing any kind of online consultations or anything like that.
Okay, thanks for letting us know. I appreciate that, Ted. Love today. Really enjoyed talking to you as always. For everyone listening, to get the show notes for this episode, please go to highintensitybusiness.com, search episode 433. Again, everything Ted's mentioned will be linked up there as much as we can find. And until next time, thank you very much for listening.
Welcome to another episode brought to you by Imagine Strength, the future of safe, simple, and effective high-intensity training equipment. Are you a HIIT studio owner looking for equipment that's not just top-notch, but also tailored to your specific needs? Imagine Strength is your answer. Inspired by the legendary Arthur Jones, Imagine Strength is revolutionizing the HIIT industry with their state-of-the-art yet affordable equipment. Their team doesn't just sell HIIT equipment, they live and breathe it. I've personally experienced their gear at the Resistance Exercise Conference, and let me tell you, it was an intense workout that I won't soon forget, in the best way possible, of course. So why choose Imagine Strength? Number one, they provide customized solutions for HIIT studios. Number two, they have budget-friendly yet high-performance designs. And number three, they're committed to innovation and excellence in high-intensity training specifically. Founder Jeff Turner and his dedicated team are on a mission to make HIIT accessible to everyone. Getting started is easy. Number one, visit imaginestrength.com. Number two, consult with their expert team. And number three, choose the equipment that will skyrocket your business. Don't wait. Head over to imaginestrength.com and elevate your HIIT studio today with Imagine Strength.